Still Benoit Lebot, former CEO of the International Partnership for Energy Efficiency Corporation, now working in the French environment minister. Uh, we are now today to talk about the IPCC report, International Panel for Climate Change. What is the IPCC and what the annual report of the IPCC exactly means?
Well, good afternoon. The International Panel for Climate Change is a very large group of scientists brought together under the UN umbrella to discuss the science of climate change. Over the past 30 years, IPCC has produced a series of reports. They just released their number 6. The 6th report was released 2 weeks ago, the final touch of the 6th report. And it's interesting to see that over time, the science of climate change has consolidated. We have a much better understanding now of the reality of climate change compared to what we had when they all started maybe 25 years ago. The report just published, the IPCC just released the final report last week. But this final report is just a compilation of a series of chapters that were progressively released over the past 2 years. So there was a chapter on the science, there was a chapter on how to adapt to climate change, on how to mitigate the greenhouse gas emission, and those were produced one after the other, and we saw some very interesting. So what can we learn from this latest IPCC report? I would like to share 5 things. First element, things are way worse than what we thought. We knew that climate change was a reality, but the observation of climate change is always greater than what the science has told us so far. So the reality of climate change is the visibility is greater and much worse than what we thought. The second aspect is now it's clear that the losses and damages of climate change, they have a scientific backing. For many years, the scientific behind the IPCC were little shy to express that this drought or these tornadoes or this storm or this extreme event or this big fire had a link with climate change. Now they can associate the level of climate incidents with the reality of climate change. And this is important because loss and damage have a scientific backing now. Because, until very recently, you give them the floor and they were not in a position to say, yes, this is climate change. The last flood in India, the last drought in California, now it's clear. It's linked to the climate change. The third element I'm getting from the report is that technology is not a silver bullet. We need technology. We need some massive technology deployment at all levels to address climate change. But counting on technology alone will not be a silver bullet. There's some condition. And we also have to adjust our lifestyle and behavior. The fourth element is there's hope in the way local communities and in particular cities are now taking the lead to address climate change. Until very recently, I would say until last 10 years, the conversation on climate change was between national government. The UNFCCC, the UN body in charge of climate change, is a body belonging to government. But now we see that the response to climate change, adapting to a warming climate, or addressing the transition is now well perceived at local level, and we see more and more cities, local government taking the lead, pushing government to just do more. And when we look closely, this is a very interesting development. It's at the level of the governance, but it has a strong importance in my view. The fifth lessons that I learned from the IPCC report, there is a small window to intervene, and this window is closing fast. We just have very little time now to really engage the decarbonization, the low carbon development that we need to be compatible with the Paris Agreement. It is really in the next 10 years that we will succeed or not in addressing climate change to meet the Paris Agreement. So every step counts, and we have a lot to do. As I said, the IPCC latest report highlight that technology is not a silver bullet, and there is a recognition that we have to adjust the way we use energy, the way we use land, the way we produce. So there is this notion that it's not only a technology fix, we have to go down to the level of where do we consume energy, where do we affect climate change, where do we generate. And suddenly, energy efficiency, making the best use of energy, but the best use of any material. It's not only energy efficiency, it's material efficiency, should be the start of the decision to be made. And I'm pleased that there is a recognition that we have to look at the demand side of the equation, and not only on the cleaner supply. Typically, cleaner supply, renewable energy, wind, solar, hydro, geothermal, biomass, this is good. We need to switch. We need to move away from fossil energy to adopt renewable energy. But it's not enough, because we have to make sure that the renewable energy will replace the existing fossil energy. And the only way to get there is to reduce the demand for energy, the demand for material. And this is where the policy behind energy efficiency is now on top on the agenda, in my view. And it's even more interesting than that, because the latest IPCC report has introduced the notion of sufficiency. Sufficiency in the way we use energy, water, resources, the soil. Because there is also the recognition that energy efficiency can lead sometimes to some rebound effects. And we cannot afford rebound effect. We have to make the whole society more energy efficient. But sometimes if you push an energy efficient technology, a light bulb or a car, there may be a tendency to use the light bulb or the car more. So at the end of the day, you may have a very energy efficient system, but if you use it more, you are not going to decrease the greenhouse gas emission at the level of what we need. This is why the notion of sufficiency that comprise behavior change, lifestyle adjustments, and some specific policy has been introduced for the very first time. The most important word introduced in the IPCC report is the term of sufficiency. A very important message to understand, and this opens a lot of activities to help us reshape the way we address demand, reshape the way we organize energy efficiency, and the response to also encourage at individual and collective level. So I think now the best way for me to make sure that we use the IPCC report is to put on the top of the agenda this notion of energy efficiency and energy sufficiency. I see several good news. The first news is that there is no ambiguity now. There is we are able to have some scientific backing to the reality of climate change. So that's news. There is no controversy. The news is that there is good news. We still have room to address climate change. The window is closing fast, but we still have the possibility. It's up to us. I would say that the reality of climate change is so severe across the world. I don't know any country where there is not an impact of climate change. And some countries are really facing tough reality of climate change, like drought or extreme weather events or heavy storms and so on. This reality, I think, is helping the government and the population to now address this is serious now. Until now, if you are not affected by climate change, it's just a concept pushed by the scientists, sometimes echoed by the media. But when we see that almost 3 billion people in the world will be affected by lack of water in the coming decades, it's everyone. It's almost everyone. So the sad reality, I think, can be taken as a good news for now us to act. And the most interesting good news for me is the notion of sufficiency, because it's really a mindset in the way we think the energy system we live in. Make sure that we not only think about the need, but what are the most important needs. And the final good news is that now renewable energy, wind, solar in particular, but also hydrogen, are less costly than fossil energy. So this massive electrification of the energy system is very much welcome. And it's a beauty for me when I see that everywhere in the world, the cost of the new power plant is always in favor of renewable energy, wind, solar, and hydro. And this will help us make the proper investment.